Hello, it's Rafael Gutierrez. Welcome to our channel. I know that I have actually taken a few weeks off. As I'm teaching summer school, I get really caught up in a lot of the stuff I'm doing, and sometimes different things take a back seat. But I do enjoy doing these, so I'm going to try to continue for as long as I can. And today I'm going to talk about something that I heard on the radio, which is martial art related. And it is something that we, as martial artists, really need to pay attention to. The other reason I'm talking about it is there was a big error that the speaker made, and it really bothered me. And so I'll tell you about that in a little bit. But before I do, I wanted to actually mention about something that my girlfriend says about her, that her dad used to tell her. And that is that, a lot of times people don't look at opportunities. They don't want to see what's in front of them. They want to actually determine the world as they want it to be rather than what it is. And a lot of times we miss these opportunities. What she actually said is her dad used to say something to the point where there's opportunities everywhere. You just have to decide to take them. Now, I will be honest, a lot of ways I didn't actually see a lot of opportunities, mostly because I wasn't ready for them. But I also try to do stuff that worked, that I thought was in my best interest. I've mentioned a lot before, for instance, I actually used to save a lot of money. I used to save any time I was working. I actually had roommates up until I bought my place, and technically, I guess even there, you can actually say I have a roommate now. But the thing is, a lot of times people don't necessarily see what people do to get to where they are. I always like Kevin Hart. If you watch his comedy, at the beginning he says everyone wants to be famous, but nobody wants to do the work. Truth is, a lot of people want stuff, but they don't necessarily want to do the work for it. And teaching really actually lets me see how people are able to succeed. For instance, I've had students who English is their second language. I have one student who her father passed away when she was young. She was actually working through high school to help her mom, pay rent, and she's now going to college. And she's making opportunities happen for herself. A lot of people don't see that, and they just think, oh, she's just someone who's going to school and because she wanted to go. And no, there's actually a reason behind it. There's thinking of where she wants to be, where she is right now, and where she wants to be. And so that's actually one of the things is a lot of times people tend to look at what other people have done, and they don't see how they got there. They just see that they accomplished something. And sometimes people actually get kind of angry at this. I have a friend who owns his own construction contractors, a business doing contracting, doing construction, and he told me that when he ended up starting his business, he ended up losing a lot of friends who were jealous of him because they said everything just worked out for him. They couldn't see that while he was busy working construction, he would actually take time to take courses to be able to get his contractor license. They didn't see how much he saved to actually be able to take the test and to move up beyond where he was. They just see that he was working with them, and now he's a contractor, and some of them for a little bit were working with them. Martial arts is actually something that is pretty similar to that. If you think about it, a lot of people look at people who do martial arts and just say, "Oh, well, he was always great at martial arts. Look at that. He did it and just all of a sudden was able to do it without even trying." And they don't pay attention to that. A lot of these kids who are amazing at martial arts, they didn't necessarily start being amazing. They worked their way up from little kids. They started trying. They actually started moving. A lot of times people see someone and say, well, why does he have a black belt and I don't? And the answer is because he worked for it. Very few people actually get anywhere in martial arts just by natural talent alone. It's that's something that's caught in my throat. It's actually the work they put in. And it's something that people tend to forget. So, it is something important. Look at what people do. And look at what people do, not just what they accomplish. And a lot of times, you'll actually start realizing that, okay, they paid A lot of people pay their dues to get to where they are. People who started their own business, it's not the business just magically worked. They work to have their business succeed. And that's actually some of the stuff I think is important about martial arts. Is it does teach you that if you want something, if you want to move up, you actually have to try and work for it. Now, uh, like I said, I was listening to the radio, and there was a lieutenant who was in charge of training for assault assault assessments. And one of the things that this lieutenant said is there's a lethality assessment that goes through it, and they had to actually put a little bit of extra for the supplemental strangulation questionnaire, because most people don't ask about strangulation unless someone mentions it, and a lot of times people don't mention it because they don't realize how dangerous it is. Now, uh, this was on this. There was a couple errors that happened, and I will actually talk about those. But it really was actually an interesting report because the lieutenant named Missy Sadran, I think is how it said, was on KPBS and mentioned a lot of these things. Some of the numbers that I found really didn't come out the same. But again, those of us who teach martial arts, especially if we teach any chokeholds, if you're in judo or jiu-jitsu or MMA and you practice chokeholds, it is a good idea to know a little bit about what people can actually come out with in the when it comes to choking someone out. Now, one of the first things that we found is uh, well, one of the mistakes she made, and I think KPBS did a complete disservice by not checking the facts, maybe helping to correct it, is the lieutenant did say carotid vein pressure can actually cause unconsciousness in 4 to 7 seconds. Now, one of the reasons that this actually bothered me a lot is there's not a carotid vein. There's a carotid artery. Actually, technically it's not even a carotid artery. It's a common carotid artery, the internal carotid artery, and the external carotid artery. These are the blood vessels that are bringing blood from your heart to your brain. And if these are cut off, you really shut down the amount of blood going to your brain. And yes, in about most of the things that I actually found, it was you can lose consciousness in pretty much 4 to 7 seconds. I think I misquoted. I think she said that it occurs in 5 seconds, which isn't still in the range. That's fine. But the carotid artery, like I said, is what you're actually pressing on. The carotid vein doesn't exist. The jugular vein is actually the vein that tends to bring blood from the brain back to the body. Now, if you compress the jugular vein, you do increase intracranial pressure, and it's actually pretty interesting. If you watch most football players now, they're actually using the mild carotid mild carotid pressure collars, and the reason is any repetitive trauma, it seems to help protect the brain a little bit. Maybe something that people involved in MMA might want to take a look at. But like I said, one of the things that happened is a lot of the stuff that this person said, this Lieutenant Misty Sadran, was done on. But I wish she would have actually understood her anatomy and not use carotid vein, but use the proper terminology, which would be carotid artery, and that KPBS would have actually pretty much gotten an expert to actually talk about the anatomy of this. One of the things that she did also mention is death can occur between 2 to 3 minutes. Now, the research I actually found, they said in less than 5 minutes, which you could say, well, 2 or 3 minutes is less than 5 minutes. But some of the people said you start getting brain damage a couple seconds after you lose consciousness. Some people say you actually start getting brain damage as soon as the blood supply to the brain is cut off. Now, why is it so dangerous? Well, a lot of us who teach martial arts may actually teach one of the carotid chokes, and the problem with teaching these is in a self-defense scenario, someone may use them. Now, I did find an article that talked about how there was no deaths in judo competitions when the carotid chokes were used, but they did also find that when these chokes were used outside of judo, or similar chokes, people did die. And I would ask you why you think the reason why these chokes would have not caused death in a contest where you have a judge whether it's MMA, judo, jiu-jitsu, yet you would have death when there's no judge. And the answer is obviously the judge, and the way I see it. If you think about it, if you're choking someone out, the judge will tell you in a contest, the judge will tell you it's over, you won, guy's out. If this is done for self-defense or for arrest, well, there's no one to tell you that you've held it on too long, and people can die. I think that's the reason why not most, but many police departments seem to try to keep their police from doing carotid chokes on suspects, because it can lead to death, and it has led to death. In New York, there was a incident that happened where a gentleman was killed, choked to death, pretty much had a carotid choke because he was selling illegal cigarettes. I mean, I think most people would agree that this is not acceptable, and really, especially as it was something that the police department has said they didn't want used, really does show why. Well, pretty much it should show police officers that if something is not legal in your department, you should make sure you don't even practice it, because it could end up leading to problems. Now, I will leave now. I'm going to do a little bit more on books as I get by, and I will try to keep up these videos. I hope you enjoyed this one, and if there's any questions, please put them in comments, and have a nice day. If you are more interested in learning about the human anatomy, there's a playlist that I made in this channel, which is Human Anatomy. It's not as in-depth as a community college class would be, or as in-depth as a doctoral program should be, but it should give you the basic understanding of the human body. Hope you enjoy this, and have a nice day.